Okay. I would like to introduce our guest speaker today. Our guest speaker is an old alumni of our fraternity, Sigma Phi Delta. His name is Victor Szczerba, so I will now read his description, or bio. As CEO and co-founder of Yeti Data, a startup that enables companies dealing with large amounts of complex data to understand what is driving results in their marketing campaigns, Victor Szczerba is leaving his mark on Silicon Valley and quite possibly each of our lives as well. Victor launched Yeti Data in 2013 after holding senior positions at Microsoft, SAP, and Sun Microsoft's Microsystems. A self-proclaimed data geek, Victor says the thing he likes most about his work is that it feeds his curiosity and allows him to build and learn and problem solve. Along with running Yeti, Victor is also heavily involved with Human Longevity Institute, which uses advanced analytics to create personalized care plans that increase our lifespans. The short-term goal is to add 5 to 10 years of healthy life by intervening early with cancer, cerebral, and cardiovascular diseases. Eventually, we hope to democratize the technology and make the impact available to everyone.
Four-syllable word, I love it.
They say I can't read.
Victor credits Marquette with helping him keep up in the fast-moving analytics field. Computer programming has changed immensely since my graduation, but Marquette gave me a framework to keep building my lifelong knowledge of software that now includes AI and ML. A pragmatic man by nature, when asked by his short-term plans, he says that hopefully by the time anyone reads this, mine will have changed. As for the long term, his main goal is to help address problems that can be solved by analytics and AI and make meaningful difference in people's lives. All right, so without further ado, Victor Szczerba.
Hey there. Let's keep this conversational, all right? So I've got a few slides. It's not fully structured. I've got a lot of backup on some of this stuff, but I'd rather just kind of tell you guys a couple stories. So first story is about my Uncle Stan. Actually, what happened to my Uncle Stan, right? Worked, and there's this concept now that people are kind of pushing around called health span. So it's not just how long you live, it's actually how long you live a healthy life, right? And so what's happening in the United States, mostly, you're pretty healthy until 60-ish or whatever, and then life just kind of goes like this over here, sadly. Now, I want to live like this. I want to live a really, really full life and do kinds of really cool stuff. And then I just want to kind of drop dead after like 2 weeks of some debilitating sickness or whatever. We're going to talk about how this is feasible with technology that is kind of around today, plus bits and pieces of, I think, things that your generation here is going to be working on. Right, and whether you're a biomedical engineer or an electrical engineer or a data scientist, it's all kind of have to come together to make this thing work. Right, so this is what we're going to talk about. And the first thing we're going to talk about is dentures. Does anyone know what dentures are? Okay, so when I used to watch cheesy daytime TV, it was always these denture commercials. They're really, these days, there's almost no such thing as dentures. There's no such thing as denture cleaning or anything else. And the reason is modern dentistry. So when you go to a dentist, right, before he starts care, he takes a look and maps your whole mouth, takes a look at, x-rays your whole mouth, does a full readout of everything, and then they start care. And the rest of your body? We don't do that at all. You basically go to the doctor when you're feeling sick, and there's all these amazing technologies that are used to chase down what's going on with people, and they're super expensive and usually too late. So if we can literally design pieces of healthcare, and AI will make it very feasible, to make it look like dental care, we're gonna all come out winners. So kind of what kills people and what kind of makes them kind of go away, right? So there's a couple of things on this list, and this is kind of by age group or whatever. We're not going to talk about accidents. We're not going to talk about this stuff. There's a few things for kids that kind of hit you in early, right? Sadly, you know, the genetics and epigenetics and stuff like that, there's a great story to tell there, but, you know, we're not going to talk about that. But it turns out Alzheimer's, cancer, chronic liver disease, COPS or respiratory disease, and heart disease are mostly preventable if you catch them early enough. And if you do the right amount of the right kind of work. And what does it look like? Right, so for the most part, it's cancer and cardiovascular. So this company that I sit on the board with, HLI, they are offering a cancer-free guarantee, actually, in China, where if you buy their services, they will literally guarantee that you're not gonna die of cancer. That's to what level the technology is kind of today. Now, they could even do that for a smoker, which if you kind of think about it is absolutely nuts, right? So the trick to all this stuff is kind of catch it early. So if you take a look at what's going on in healthcare, and I know this is kind of really boring stuff, but we need to kind of set a baseline, is it's super reactive. This healthcare that we have today mostly has not changed for the last 100 years. Prior to 100 years ago, healthcare was every doctor kind of cooked up their own little way to do their medicine. So about 100 years ago, you basically was the first time you could show up to 2 different doctors in 2 different states or 2 different countries and kind of get a similar treatment. We're mostly operating that today, right? Whereas there's all these amazing technologies that if you can use them early and preventable and make them personalized, you can solve a lot of these things. And if you read, we talked about making this thing a little bit of a talk about AI. The reason is I have a feeling that this is where most of the big opportunities in this space that you guys are going to be working on, your generation. So that's how we wanted to kind of turn this thing around. So human longevity. Craig Venter, this guy is a complete nut. He sequenced the human genome and created a healthcare company. And the thesis was, if I know your genome, I can give you better healthcare. And he spent $600 million being wrong. But he got a lot of things right. So the company itself is now in existence. It's basically longevity care for billionaires. So you pay, it's a $20,000 service that you subscribe to. You go in there and you do full body MRIs twice a year. You go and do full blood scans and blood tests 4 times a year. And they can pretty much guarantee you're not gonna die of cancer, heart disease, stroke, aneurysm, which is kind of nuts. Where was he wrong? He assumed that once you got the DNA mapped, that the DNA was going to be your software and your body was your hardware. Well, it turns out your DNA is actually part of your hardware. And epigenetics is how the pieces of your genes kind of light up or don't light up. And what makes those things light up and not light up is the part that he was wrong on. And that is where large data sets, large correlated data sets from many different places, like what was the weather like when you were a kid, were you subject to some disease, and then you had this gene, and then you got the flu or a coronavirus when you were 19, and then you were subject to this pollution, and the 3 of those things ended up becoming cancer or whatever, right? So this is what we've been doing at HLI. We've literally pioneered longevity care. So if you have the money, and an average person that goes through this thing is about $30 million net worth. They pay $20K a year. They're self-made. Around 50 is kind of the average age of a person that goes through this thing. And this is really important because we're going to talk about some numbers on when you think of a relatively rich person that is living a great life the way they want it, and they think they're totally healthy. And then when you do the scans and you do all the other testing proactively, you find different stuff. So full things that we do, the genome sequencing, the MRI, the labs, the calcium scores, blah, blah, blah. The latest are microbiome. And the microbiome is basically all the stuff that lives inside your guts. And this is going to require a ton of analysis on AI. And we're also now doing a lot of liquid biome. Basically, you can actually do a screen. If you know what the cancer looks like, you could literally just see whether it's present inside your blood. And that's it. It's totally crazy. So the problem is a lot of, like, lung cancer is actually 2,000 different diseases with 2,000 different genes, and you got to put that together. And it turns out that if you can scan everybody on a regular basis all the time, and you can analyze how big the weirdness in your body is, you can actually start plotting growth rates of all that stuff. So you can actually see what you caught and why and how long they had it. And this is what we got. So out of an average person that is super wealthy, goes through the labs, and they think that they're just doing this thing just for fun, right? 1 out of every 7, we saved their life. Just by using the same technologies that's there every day, and we just use it prophylactically in advance. And then 3 out of 7 people, what we do is we find things before they're, before they kind of show up. And then people are super happy about it. By the way, you take this thing, fast forward this thing to 60. Now all of a sudden we find almost 80. And all we're doing is screening with everything we got and trying to connect as many dots together. And right now we're doing this thing through just sheer muscle power. So a couple of things. Here's just a couple of these things that if you kind of catch them early enough, what your lifespan is with it, and then if you catch it early, and in many cases it's gone. So we are now starting to remove some cancers using hypodermic needles, if you could find it early enough. If your imaging AI is so good that you could spot an anomaly, you could literally remove it with a hypodermic needle. Here's the other crazy thing that we found. These rich guys, they send their kids and sometimes their grandkids in, and so now we've got all this data on these huge data sets. Basically what we found is heart conditions can start in your 20s. And if you could find them, you could treat them early. But most people never look. So the guy who has a heart attack at 43 or something like that, probably something showed up when he was 30. There's another thing that happens, it's called a widowmaker. So you've got 4 main arteries inside your heart, and one of them literally takes this really crazy turn. And if anything gets caught in there, boom, you're dead. And therefore, it's the widowmaker. And it always happens to people kind of early. And the next story I'm going to tell you is about collaboration. So UCSF has the #1 breast cancer facility in the world. It's kind of amazing. What they did is 20 years ago, if you got diagnosed with breast cancer, before that, what would happen is you would get a call from your doctor, then you would then try to chase down somebody to give you chemo. Then you would have to chase down a psychiatrist to help you deal with all the family issues of cancer. Then you had to chase down all these other doctors and all that other stuff. And instead, what they did is they just put everybody in one spot. So if you got diagnosed with cancer, you show up there, and in one day, your whole treatment plan for your cancer is taken care of. Their survival rate on cancer, I think, is something like 7 or 8 times what it is in the lower kind of hospitals. And all it is just collaboration. And specifically, what they're doing is they're collaborating with data, and they're looking at the pieces of the data using AI on how to make those connections better. So that was where they moved about 15, 20 years ago. Then they went one step further. Then they said, well, hell, we've got all these great patients, and we know their genetics, and we know their history, and we know all that stuff. Why don't we work with people that are doing drug development and push that data into their hands as fast as possible? So they literally just brought their aperture completely wide and started making links into discovery, analysis, development, clinical care, everything. And all of these areas, I mean, this looks like a flow chart for data. All right. No discussions, no questions. This gets pretty boring up here without discussions, okay. Then let's talk about wearables. Wearables is my favorite. I love this stuff. Right now I have a continuous glucose monitor on. I've got my Apple Watch on. I do all kinds of wearables. I try to quantify my life as much as possible. And I have a feeling that this is where a lot of the places where a lot of you guys will be working on is in this space, especially kind of crossing wearables with different things. So right now, the leading indicator of if you have a condition where you need to take a mental health drug based on the judge makes you take it, the number one way to monitor that is an Apple Watch. And if you start getting jittery, you're off your meds. You're gonna get a call from the judge these days already in some places. So think about all the data that these devices are throwing off, and what they need to do is they need to be just correlated and ground through and looked at over and over again, so that we could get that crazy outcome that we're looking for. Now, UK is already basically, they could, in the UK, they literally say, do these 5 exercises using a cell phone, and then they do put a couple connections on you, and they could literally tell you what they think your lifespan is going to be just from looking at that video. That's it. And then they actually just did another test where if you're sitting cross-legged on the floor and you want to stand up and you need any help at all, like you need a hand to help or 2 hands or all that other stuff, they can tell you how long you're going to live. Just on that. And you know who figured that out? Yes, sir.
Oh, like what are they looking for? Like in those videos, like the amount of struggle. Do they analyze like?
It turns out that flexibility is like a precursor to how much you can exercise or how much activity you do. And so if you got injured, let's say you had a bad ski accident or whatever, and then your leg starts acting up on you, and then you start moving less and less, you're actually, the downward slide will start, not because of the ski injury, but because you're moving less.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're like, oh, it hurts, I don't feel like doing it, and all that other stuff. Yeah. And so now people are literally looking for outcomes and they are looking to see what are the best sources of data that I could get from all these different places, and let's see if we could kind of correlate all this stuff. I mean, there's so much cool stuff that can come out of this space. It's insane, right? I have a shirt that I put on, made out of these little triangles, and you take a photo of it, and it literally creates a 3D image of my body. And I'll tell you guys a little bit about my personal story next, but what happened was one of those people that showed up on one of those charts that was kind of heading toward the bad side of town, that was me. So about a year ago, I decided I was gonna lose a bunch of weight, and I lost 70 pounds, and I did it using drugs, but also very extensively working with my doctor on wearables, and we literally monitored everything to kind of get me through that. Any questions? I feel like I'm racing through this stuff twice as fast as I need to be.
So the monitoring ability then is what enables then, okay, now we can capture data.
Well, you create data. Yes, you create it. The issue is, let's just take your Apple Watch data. Actually, it's kind of really funny. It turns out that there's something on your Apple Watch that most people don't think very much about, and it's called heart rate variability. And it basically says, here my heart can go rest at this level and can, at a heavy intensity exercise, go to this level. And it turns out that the higher that number is, the healthier you are. That's literally, if you only had to look at one number, all the rest, your activity and all that other stuff turns out to be complete junk compared to just that one number, right? And if you have that connectivity and you can map it with outcomes, right, whether it's data or whatever that is, you can figure out those weirdo connections. And I think that that's where you guys are gonna spend a fair amount of your career doing this kind of stuff. Yes?
And then the mapping is what's done by the AI, correct? Or no?
So the correlation is done by the AI. So basically what you think about it is the very first step of this whole process is actually just kind of creating new data, right? Kind of living that quantified life. Then once you have that data, then what you start doing is you start saying, okay, I'm gonna take that data and I'm gonna see how healthy this person is, or I'm gonna take that data to see how active they are, or basically look at data from other systems, think about it as outcome, right? And then you you could also take a look at data from external sources like environmental or whatever, and then you kind of put all of that stuff together. And as a normal data scientist, you almost have no shot of really munging through that much data and seeing the patterns, but using AI, you can. So all of a sudden, AI could go through and sift these ginormous data sets that come from different places and correlate to outcomes. And that's the most important part, is that correlate to outcomes, because typically signals are in one place and outcomes are in another spot. And that's been actually the problem all along. All right, so what am I working on? I'm actually right now helping other people lose weight. What happened is I just got sick and tired of telling people how I lost weight, and then so we literally charge $12,000 and they pay us up front for 6 months, and then I lose all the weight they need. And that's it. They write us a check, we lose the weight using doctors, and it's kind of crazy, and it works. We only have had a couple hundred people go through the program, but we only started 6 months ago. Yeah, the numbers are actually really big. I ran a lot of software companies, and I've never seen growth of revenue go that fast before in my entire life. So it's actually kind of crazy. Now the story behind this was I was having dinner with Craig, and then the guy who was the chief medical officer at Human Longevity, and one guy's a scientist, one guy is a medical doctor about care, and I'm the engineer. I'm the geeky, I need to think about how the process, and we put all this stuff together, and it just worked. Okay. Imaging. So if you catch, happens to be bladder cancer, which most people catch bladder cancer when it's really advanced. It hurts to pee, and then you chase it down, and then after 10 different doctor's appointments, the guy's gonna give you an MRI and you're gonna find that. Right? Right now, if you go through MRIs at HLI, we're gonna find it at stage 1. We even have a way to find it at stage 0, but it's really, really noisy. So think about what an MRI does here. And let's talk about MRIs for a second, because I think that this is gonna be really, really cool. So MRIs, if you wanted a full body MRI 12 years ago, it would have cost $80,000, and it would have taken about 8 hours to do. Now, you can do a full body MRI for a couple $1,000s, and it takes 45 minutes. And we're working actively to get the cost of an MRI down so that it's less than $100. So literally, just like going to the dentist and getting your x-ray done, all of a sudden you could just kind of see what's going on. I already know a couple guys, rich guys, that have an MRI in their yacht. And they MRI themselves all the time. If you have your own, the cost is nothing, right? Just press the button. And but guess what happens in an MRI? An MRI is this radio and electromagnetic signal comes in, and it basically creates a picture of what's going on inside your body when it's living, right? So that means this bladder is actually squishing around, or when you're taking an MRI of a heart, it's actually pumping blood, and so everything is working. But the AI is so good, and it can get actually so much better, in that now what you can do is you could take a look at, if there's like 17 different parts of a kidney, right? Now what you could do is you can figure out what percentage of mass is each part of that kidney. And I know this sounds like, oh my God, how boring is that? But the reality is this. What if you can say, well, if the ratio between, part A of the kidney and part B of the kidney starts changing, we know that a disease is coming. And we've already seen some examples of elements of this. The other thing that they're starting to do with MRIs in Europe is if you do 2 MRIs a year apart, what you can do is you could figure out a rate at which parts of your body are just kind of wearing down, right? One of the most common surgeries of a wearing down surgery in the United States is a hip replacement, right? Everybody knows somebody's had a hip replacement. Europe thinks that they could completely get rid of hip replacement surgery in 10 years using MRIs. What they do is they could go through and see if you got soft tissue, they could measure it, and they could measure at what rate your soft tissue is disappearing. And they can also measure kind of the measurement of your body and the gait, if like one leg is longer or another one and your weight is off and it's compounding issues. And then as long as you have soft tissue there, you could inject stem cells and build up your soft tissue and completely avoid a hip replacement. So the chances of you guys getting a hip replacement is hopefully 0. Which is actually pretty cool, because it is really a debilitating surgery where they take this part of your body and pull it out and put in a bunch of metal in there and close it back up and teach you to walk again. Twice, usually. And so, but all of a sudden, right, so think about that. If you can measure each little subcomponent and then all of a sudden there might be some kind of a cancer that hits the skin on your kidney first, and then all of a sudden it's gonna do something to one of the lungs, and then it hits something else inside of your heart. That data is gonna be there for you guys to analyze. I know it sounds kind of boring and stuff like that, but for me, this stuff is kind of fun because and figure out a way to kind of get myself, I'm not sure I could get to 100, but I'm pretty sure I could get myself to 90, right? You know, I'm still the drop out of a helicopter skiing kind of guy and all that other stuff. All right, so let's talk about engineering. So we kind of talked about a couple elements that are kind of creating this, right? Growth of cloud, AI, cost of this stuff is dropping like a rock. Human genome sequencing, there's the 23andMe that sequences 1%, forget that stuff, right? The real human genome sequencing right now, this thing literally was 20 grand 5 years ago, is dropping to $100 next year. So the reason, and right now, almost everybody should have their full genome sequenced. And here's what's crazy, at $100, you know what happens? If they find a cancer inside your body or find an anomaly inside your body and you can get a DNA of that cancer cell or that anomaly, you can now create a program to go and look for that for the rest of your life. If it ever shows up again, you can find it. So that's what's super cool about the cost of sequencing dropping, because now all of a sudden you can almost sequence everything and just keep on looking for it. No problem, going. We talked a little bit about the MRI cost. I could see a world where, and full body MRI right now is kind of a couple grand. I could see a world in a couple of years where it's literally gonna be a couple $100. And there's two things that are causing this, right? Number one is the big machines are getting faster, but there's also and they require these really crazy electromagnets and literally a helium dump in case everything goes wrong or whatever. Now they have fixed magnet MRI machines that are coming out that require no Faraday cage. And they could literally be sitting right here, and I could literally be MRIing my machine or my hand right over here, and then we could go and take a look at it and see all of the dumb stuff I've done to break my finger over the years, one after another, and it'll be just right there. And I could send that image to a doctor, and I could see a world where a lot of people kind of have it in their house. And then we talked about the wearables and all that stuff. So then let's talk about kind of the full cycle. So the code, we talked about that. That's basically your, what would happen is the doctor goes and tells, goes through your family history, when did your maternal grandmother die, blah, 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 all that stuff. If you're lucky, they'll do a physical exam on you and basic blood work. Here's what's happening now. The genetics and the epigenetics, this is exploding. This is gonna be a factor of, I'm gonna say with epigenetics 10 to the 4th, larger data set and insights available. Because now all of a sudden, who you are inside your DNA, the environment that you were brought up in, plus the collection of colds and diseases you've had, now all of a sudden show up in your epigenetic profile. And you can figure out and almost anticipate when you're gonna get sick with certain nasty things. The kind of blood testing now, you could literally, whereas here it would be literally 6 markers, at HLI I think we test 250 markers. Now, maybe it's arguably too much. In China, you know what they do? They monitor the level of D1 in the worker's blood. You know why they do that? Because if they are not getting enough D1, they're gonna show up or not show up to work because they're gonna get sick. So they literally make their employees take D1 pills.
Jeez.
And how do they find that? AI. So this is kind of the map where I think that a lot of the opportunities lie. I mean, I think that there's a very long conversation to be had on each of these things. I wanted to kind of fly by at a pretty fast speed, at a high level, to give you guys a map of where I think the opportunities lie. But we do want to talk about the bad part of AI too. So we kind of went through and did an analysis of, here are the things that we found in people and inside of HLI, how much it would have cost if we found it early, how much it would cost because we found it, and then if we took those cost savings and extrapolated it over the whole population, how much we would be saving the US government and all that other stuff. And then when I showed this to our AI scientists, they said, ha, I could sit there and now use the data and say that person's not worth operating on or forget it. I know from their epigenetics that something is not gonna be right, and it doesn't matter how much money we go and chase down this thing, that person's not gonna make it anyway, so why bother? So, as with all of these new technologies, I think what we wanna do is we wanna talk about, the downsides, and this looks like this really positive chart, but then when you see like geeky AI dudes going after it, they're like, oh, I could even save that, and I could get rid of this person, and all that other stuff, just from behind the spreadsheet. So that's kind of where I plan to end things at the 35-minute mark, just about 47 seconds late. Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Oh, please.
You keep talking about like gathering this data and integrating it to like correlate an outcome, like
Yeah.
you said. So how are you guys thinking of doing that? Are you guys still collecting that data, like you said, through wearables and then a physician, or do you guys want some type of centralized thing where it just you connect to the wearables directly?
So let me give you the way bigger picture.
Okay.
All right, so yeah, I go through this geeky crap at HLI and I get, ultra quantified and all that other stuff. But the reality is they aren't my primary care doctor, right? So I go to a place called PAMF, Palo Alto Medical Foundation, for some of the stuff. And then when it gets a little hairy, I go to Stanford Healthcare, which is, right across the street, and for the other stuff. Now, the reality is HLI, to get to the essence of what they want to do, yes, they have my wearable data, and yes, they've got my scanning data, but you know what? They also need access to my healthcare records from PAMP and from Stanford and from God knows where else I could get that data and put it together. So that connectivity is already starting to happen. And then when the connectivity happens, basically you almost need like an anonymization layer a little bit, so it can't be actually chased back down to you, so that this nasty shit can't happen and you get like disqualified for health insurance or life insurance or whatever based on some stuff that's sitting around in some database or whatever. So where does it reside?
Yeah.
That's a problem, because if Stanford has my medical care and I'm at HLI and they have my own little version, I can actually let this group take a look at that. I could actually even give them the extraction rights to take it or whatever, but do I trust HLI with that data? No, I don't.
Yeah.
Right? And then so that's actually going to be a ton of also work on as far as data masking and data anonymization and quite frankly more AI models to make sure that the pieces that I'm extracting don't junk up this stuff, if that's in highly untechnical terms.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
But right now, it's the Wild West. Everybody's grabbing data from everywhere.
Yeah, that's what kind of sounds
Kind of
like,
nuts.
Yeah.
And that data is ending up in places like this. And I know for a fact that life insurance companies are looking for this data where it's available to price or deny life insurance already. And expect health insurance next and all that other stuff. Yes, sir.
What were like the actual things you did to lose that weight?
Have you guys heard about the skinny shots, the Ozempic?
Yeah, actually,
Yes.
I have. My dad's in healthcare.
Yes. So it turns out that 100 years ago, a drug was found in France called metformin, and it was a really awesome way to manage diabetes. Okay. And so that drug has been used for a long time, and its number one side effect has been actually weight loss. So this is like the grandbaby. You and I, when we eat, there's two kinds of systems inside your body, right? There's kind of an electrical signaling system and a chemical signaling system that says, oh, I need to do this, I'm hot, I'm cold, I'm hungry, I'm full, whatever it is. So there's a system inside our bodies called GLP-1. And basically what happens is it says, I'm full, and then it sends out chemicals throughout your body saying, listen, shut down the eating, shut down the stomach, shut down the brain looking at food, shut down all that stuff. Okay, it lasts 15 minutes inside of our bodies. Inside of Gila monsters, which are these ugly little things found in Arizona, they only eat every 6 months. GLP-1 lives inside their body for 6 months. And researchers found it there, and they isolated it, and it turns out that it's a change in the pH level that lets it survive as long as it is. It's actually a hormone, not a chemical. And what you do is I do a shot once a week, and it basically completely wiped out my appetite. And so I went from eating around 3,700 calories a day to 700. And I was never hungry, and I lost 3.5 pounds a week over the course of whatever it was, that number of weeks. And
Is that healthy for the body?
so it turns out the answer to that is maybe. So since GLP-1 actually exists in your body already, your body's used to it, right? But it only really exists for 15 minutes at a time to kind of have your body shut down. But I could tell you this, the GLP-1 has been, so Poland is, I'm Polish, and I lived in Poland for a while after grad school. And so I use a lot of cases about the Polish government. The Polish government has nationalized healthcare. They actually have used Ozempic for over 7 years to manage diabetes. And it is actually the lowest cost diabetes treatment that there is. Now in Poland, that shot is $30. Here, that shot's $1,300. Welcome to US healthcare. But it literally, the Polish government buys that shot. So they have people that have been on it for 7 years, and they're healthy as an ox. And mostly because it's more of a hormone than a chemical.
If it decreases your appetite that much, do you have to take nutritional supplements then along with it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, hell yeah. I mean, so I'm kind of a closet vegetarian, and you really don't get your B12, and you gotta take your B12 if you're not eating any meat or eggs or whatever.
So with it being like a hormone and stuff, do you have to like cycle it on and off rather than just taking it consistently?
So the answer to that is probably. And we're using actually, so right now what we're doing, we're actually using AI models actually really extensively and running many experiments, and all of our patients, even there's some really high profile guys that are in our initial couple hundred patients, and we tell them we don't know the answer, but we'll get there. So one person tries this, another person gets to do that, and then we're gonna get to the bottom of that probably sometime next year, is I guess. Right now, what I do is I cycle, I went off of it. I went to that metformin, which was the stuff that was invented in France or whatever, for a while there, and then I went completely off of it until I went to Brazil, and then I need to go back on the shot. So I've been on it for 3 weeks. I don't think I'm gonna take the shot next week. I don't need it anymore. My appetite is pretty much dust. And so we've got some real high profile sports personalities that are on our program. Actually, what they came from human longevity, and when they found out what we were doing, they're like, oh my God, signing up for that right now. And the results have been insane. So my co-founder, he lost 47 pounds, I lost 69 pounds, yeah.
So this is kind of a life and death shift data analyzing for you.
Yes.
Because previously, right, the data you worked on wasn't
Wasn't
human.
health data.
Right.
For me, data was data by the pound. I didn't care where it was from. I figured out how to process it, find stuff in it, hide it, get rid of it, or reprocess it, or, AIFI it and tag it and do all that stuff. And then this actually just, to me, had more of a higher purpose. And so that's why I'm so passionate about it.
So I know you shared that story about your uncle. What was your, was that like your inspiration to basically dive into this whole process of analyzing, your body processes and stuff?
No.
No.
Close though. So I was the ultimate hedger when I got to Marquette. Kind of a kid from immigrants, so not a lot of money, and I had to have a job. And so when I when I was going and making a selection to go to school, I couldn't decide whether I wanted to be a doctor or an engineer, and I literally shot right in the middle, and I started life as a biomedical engineer. And
It was brand new in the program, right? 'Cause
it was brand new. It was like Christine, the dean or whatever, was like one of the first few people in that kind of she was like a year or two ahead or whatever. It's actually relatively new. And then at that point was everybody that had a job or had a biomedical degree at Marquette was virtually guaranteed a job, because GE Medical Systems was here, then there was Marquette Electronics was here, and what was the precursor to Philips Medicine. They were all literally between here and Madison. That this whole area was biomedicalville, right? And then a recession kind of came, and then at the last minute, they basically said, we're probably not gonna be able to guarantee you guys jobs. So the last semester, I switched to electrical. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the future of people getting full DNA scan or analysis, and just how readily available it will be? Like you said, it's gonna be cheap very soon. If it already is cheap.
It is cheap already.
Yeah.
So there's two things you want to talk about your DNA. So it turns out your DNA doesn't change, right? Your epigenome changes, but your DNA doesn't. But what is known about the DNA changes by the minute, right? In fact, the amount we know of just under 2% of the DNA right now, but our rate of doubling of our knowledge is 3.5 years, right? So 3.5 years from now, we will know 4%. 7 years from now, we'll know 8, and 10 years from now, we'll own 16. And so you could literally just linearly graph it, and we'll know almost everything about the human genome in 2032 or something. No, 36 or something, whatever that is. And so what happens is your genome didn't change, but what happens is you got to have it re-indexed every year. So they have to kind of go through and say, oh, we know this piece about this part. Okay, that's what, and then they just they append it. It needs to be appended every year. So right now what happens is you could get your mapping done cheap, but then if you want it rescanned with all the latest knowledge, that's where they soak you. Yeah.
So with all the data you have access to, I'm fairly confident you could do this, but I want to ask, have you calculated the cost in dollars to extend the life on average of a person by a year?
Have we, if you catch it early, so if we run everybody through something like an HLI, where we're scanning them every 6 months, right? And assume the cost of HLI is free, which it isn't, but let's just assume for the case of your example, that cost would almost be nothing. I mean, that's the point.
But in terms of the cost right now, somebody who is on that program, could you take like the average extension of life from that program divided by the cost to figure out how much money you need to extend your own life by a year?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking statistics, right? Statistics suck when you get, hit by a car and 0.01% of people get hit by a car, right? But it happens to be you or whatever. The health insurance or the life insurance guys have calculated that out. I could get that number for you because we partnered with Prudential on some of that stuff, which is why I could tell you the Prudential guys are not good, not the most wholesome actors in this, where they're going at it.
You're on record now. But that trade-off is not just extending life, but potentially extending quality.
Yeah.
So
that's what you want to shoot for.
So someone is maybe more productive at work longer, uses the healthcare system less. It isn't as much of a drain on a healthcare system or whatever it may be. So it's not just extending life, but extending quality.
Right. Yeah.
So,
it's called health span.
Yeah.
That you're healthy for much longer. You're living that. So if you're talking about just extending somebody's life just to add another year to the statistic, I could find out those numbers for you. I just don't know them off the top of my
If you go back to that first slide you had that had the two graphs side by
my
side.
my crappy graph.
I don't think it's crappy. So there's a parallel here in communication systems. On the left is an uncorrected system. And that's what our lives are. On the right is after a lot of error correction's been applied.
That's right. All you do is literally just maniacally go after and correct and correct and find and Pareto and dig and scream and all that stuff. That's exactly right. So remember, I kind of titled this thing of engineering a longer health span. That's the point, is just using just regular stuff that is available off the shelf in many cases even today, much less the amazing stuff you guys are gonna develop in your careers. And you're absolutely right. This is it.
And in error correction systems, you proactively apply them up front.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you've done.
That's exactly right. And you just sit there and maniacally go after, hey, this is gonna kill you unless we find this. Okay, so let's work on that. Then this, and then let's work on that. Yeah.
If we could reach a point where everyone could have a good quality of life until, 80 or 90.
Not everybody, but yeah.
Most people.
Most people, yeah.
Most people. Do you think our, welfare and social security systems would still be able to stand, or would people have to wait longer until they retire?
It turns out that if you are in the United States, hold on a second, and you were born in the top quintile, which means the top 20% of wealth in the United States, a male, the chances of you living to 97 are over half, is kind of where things are being projected. The only thing, actually, there's only two things that have changed the curve in the last couple years. Number one has been obesity / diabetes, right? That goes all up rising, and then COVID has just literally just devastated the statistics. But prior to that, everybody was literally, you guys will, there's a good chance that a third of the people in this room, without any new stuff, will live to 100.
And you're looking at me and Greg for that, right?
We went to Marquette 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I'm just gonna make a comment, and you can have your share your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
And kind of like to Greg's point, where like, do you view our body as like a control system kind of way?
I approach our body as an engineering system, and that's it.
Yeah.
Literally.
Think of it as a state engine, that's what it is.
And now that we can actually quantify elements of the body with an MRI and all that, you could literally now do a weight estimate from your MRI. You literally just could MRI a person, and and I think it's less than 0.001% error rate through an MRI. Yeah.
So you work with like hormones and stuff that like only cause you to lose weight, and like losing weight, well, like weight loss like that in a short period of time, like, you know, it affects your metabolism. You lose muscle mass. Do you guys experience? Do you guys experiment with any compounds that like allow you to maintain your muscle mass and metabolism?
So here is how I will answer that. Here's how I will answer that question. I'm gonna say, out of the 70 pounds, right? And I'm a hardcore skier and a hardcore bicyclist, right? Where I ride at least 100 miles a week, and I ski 30, 40 days a year if I can, all that other stuff, right? So I might have been fat, but I was kind of muscular fat under there. I actually think that I really had to only lose 50 pounds, and then that last 20 was musculature that was there to move that extra 50 pounds around. So I didn't mind losing it all the way down. And I'll give you guys some crazy things. I went from an XXL, this is an M. I went from a size 40 pant to a 32. I just went. And most of it was, and I was not afraid to lose that last piece. The funny thing is my doctor said, don't. And because what happened is I was losing weight so fast that I dropped to my muscle mass or whatever is that muscle, the percentage of fat, right? I was at 9% body fat. Wow. For a while there, because, and then now I'm back to a normal 14-ish or something like that, right? But there was exactly right. I literally went through that, and I had to make a decision that I am going to let myself get weaker because of that. And ironically, I'm a way better skier and a way better biker than I have been with all that extra musculature moving around.
So on that idea, would you think that monopolization would be a huge problem with that MRI market, or do you think that it's already being developed by so many different people that
the MRI machines, or
like the
machines available to people,
publicly available,
or healthcare based on MRI? So 3 different levels. Sorry, you gotta be more
I would
specific.
say like, do you think, which direction of those three do you think it's gonna go in? Do you think that it's gonna be solely like you have to have insurance and you can do the MRI?
I actually think, no, I actually, in Europe already, I think that MRIs are just you're gonna find them in every gym at a certain point, and you could get them for $100 or whatever, and you're like not sure whether you pulled your muscle or did you tear a tendon or whatever, just sit inside that MRI for 5 minutes and check it right away. It literally, it's just all there. There's just a couple things MRIs don't do well on, right? Yeah.
So, would you think that, is that gonna like necessitate the hiring of like more people who are like well versed in reading those radiology scans? Like,
I actually think it's gonna be less.
people will be better at viewing it themselves, or the software will be able to do it, the AI.
Say the AI.
Because AI
Yes,
will be
we've been
so
smarter.
good. And then if you have a questionable read, right? So here's what happens, right? I mean, think about it as an engineering system, right? 95% of the MRIs are an easy read, right? Yeah, there's nothing wrong or something really clearly wrong. And then there's a certain percentage of that are kind of on the bubble. And those ones on the bubble need multiple people to review them, because the model just isn't there yet, right, for whatever reason. And I actually think that, I don't know, I could see a world 15, 20 years from now where an MRI will be read only by AI. And you will literally be able to scan your hand, shoot it over, and then on your phone will pop up what happened. Like, you're an idiot, you just broke your finger, dummy, right? You don't need x-ray, you don't need anything.